Ken Klippenstein is in the United States. I've no doubt he's got at least one eye on the bloviating and ovating crowd in the Capitol this evening. So let's find out if I'm right. Ken, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. How many standing ovations has Netanyahu had up until now, and why are they ovating?
Well, he's coming to visit the U.S. for the first time, I believe, since the October 7th attack and the subsequent war in Gaza. And so this has caused a lot of consternation on the part of the Democratic base, which increasingly is fractured on this question, particularly young people that you see demonstrating in colleges and universities across the country, voicing their concerns about the U.S.'s intimate role in both intelligence sharing and the provision of weapons and military equipment to the Israelis in the context of this conflict. And so you've seen a number of Democratic representatives, including the presumptive nominee for president, Vice President Kamala Harris, back out of this talk that Netanyahu is going to give to the Congress, which has been bitterly criticized, including by the President Biden's own party, that they would have him invited and given a platform to discuss and make his case for the war at this time.
But most of them are there, and most of them are ovating. And it seems almost pristine, the comparison between the unpopularity of Netanyahu at home in Israel and his apparently wild and unbounded support in Washington. Notwithstanding the withdrawals that you mention, and Rashida Tlaib has put up a sign calling him a war criminal and so on, but the vast majority of the American political class and the media class are right behind the killer, aren't they?
That's absolutely right. And I don't want to overstate the number of people that have backed out of this meeting, but I should say relative to what you've seen in the years prior, it's unusual to see even this minority of representatives back out of a meeting like that, and flies against the rhetoric coming from the president of the United States, Biden, who said himself, I'm not making this up, he said, I'm more liked in Israel than I am here, referring to the United States. Yeah. And so when you see that kind of rhetoric coming from the Oval Office, from the very highest echelons of government, and you see his own, at least parts of his own party backing out, that's very unusual, at least in my lifetime.
Now, speaking of Biden, are we going to get proof of life of him this evening? What form of life is it likely to be if we do?
So he will be giving his first address to the nation since announcing via tweet, I should add, that he would be dropping out of the race, to the shock of basically everyone in the country. None of this leaked, suggesting that there's a very tight hold on information within his inner circle, that nobody was able to find this out until he posted it to Twitter. And then he just ghosted. He just disappeared. He hasn't given any public addresses since then. Now, in fairness to him, he has COVID, and so he's being treated for that. So, it's not completely straightforward, but, an event like that is extremely, shocking to people. And I would have expected something in the way of even just, a short address from him in the last couple of days. But be that as it may, today at 8 p.m. Eastern, he will be addressing the country, and he's expected to talk about that. And there's a number of interesting questions that remain to be answered, which is that several days prior to his withdrawal from the campaign, he said only God Almighty could make him stop running. And then, of course, several days later, he stops running. So how do you account for that? Second question would be, how does he respond to the argument advanced in particular by Republicans, but by others as well, that if he's not fit to campaign, why is he fit to be president? That's another interesting question that he'll have the opportunity to answer. And then third, he's really put Vice President Harris in a difficult position, because she is vice president, who is, of course, subordinate to the president. And so a big question now is, to what extent will she be allowed to deviate from the president's position on various things, to differentiate herself from him in his position? We were talking about Gaza a moment ago. That would be an interesting question, but one which, as vice president, she's going to be limited in her ability to say something contrary to what the administration is saying. So these are all interesting questions that I think there's a chance that he might answer, and that people should be watching the address for answers to.
You think he jumped, or was he pushed?
I think he was forced out. I think it's very clear that he was forced out, because if you look at the reporting his own public messaging people, his comms people, they were telling the press, and they have to put their names on these things, and they lose credibility when something is shown to be blatantly untrue, as was the case when, it was right up until the day of his announcement that his administration was saying he's in it to win it, and we're not backing down under any circumstances. And so what that says to me is that that's what he wanted, but the public opinion, you have a super majority of Americans opposed to his running again, including, I should add, a majority of Democrats. And this majority stretches back. This is a common misconception in the press. The press is kind of doing an end zone dance and taking credit for drawing attention after the debate to his physical decline, or however you want to characterize it. The truth is, if you look at polling going back at least last year, the majority of Americans didn't want him running again, citing his age. So this is something that, by and large, the ordinary people in this country understood. It's just that Washington didn't understand it. The day of the debate was the day that Washington realized it. Everybody else already knew it, or the majority of people already knew it. And then they announced it as, it's kind of like Christopher Columbus. We've discovered this continent with teeming with people already that everybody already knew and understood. But no, we did it. You credit us. And it's very self-serving, but that's not actually the timeline that happened. So I think this was generally appreciated by the vast majority of the public, and he was just no longer able to ignore that.
Now, your president's gone. Your head of your Secret Service, as it's called, is gone. Why did she do that? Did she jump, or was she pushed?
I would say the question is why she didn't resign sooner. Because if you look at the hearing, she was subpoenaed to get her to testify before Congress, stonewalled on virtually every question. She was asked to such an extent that even the most loyal pro-Biden liberal Democrats like Jamie Raskin, the ranking member, the second most senior member of that oversight committee that invited her to answer questions, he called for her resignation, which is extraordinary. When is the last time you can remember a president's own party calling for the resignation of one of his top officials? Extremely unusual. And so, just in talking to ordinary people, I haven't looked at the polling about this, but after the assassination attempt, just everyone I know was in Democrat, conservative, was just like, she's got to go. This is unacceptable. And I think that's the common sense response to it. So I think the question is, why did she hang on for so long? And the answer I think can be found in the reporting around her appointment, which is that she was a very close friend of President Biden's. And so my guess would be that she thought that she would have some insulation from the public outrage because of that. And I'm guessing Biden didn't immediately call on. He probably tried to ride it out, just like he tried to ride out this wave of calls for him to resign. So we're almost seeing an echo of Biden's issue with his campaign and the calls to drop out.
I've just been talking with Scott Ritter. Both of us are, I think, quite deeply absorbed into the events in Pennsylvania. And it looked like a coup to both Mr. Ritter and myself. It looked like a state-sponsored, enabled assassination attempt, plan A or B, depending on how you count these things. They didn't get him with the lawfare. Stormy Daniels didn't do for him. And so he had to be terminated with extreme prejudice. And that there seems to be mounting evidence that state agencies were involved in that. What's your take on that, Ken?
I think what that assessment overlooks, first of all, I don't share that assessment. And I would say that what that assessment overlooks is the profound incompetence of the Secret Service as an agency, which flies in the face of, I think, the popular imagination of the security services in the United States, which, informed by Hollywood and by the security services themselves, imagines a super, competent, almost omniscient force that sees and understands everything. In my experience, being a national security reporter, that in some regards is true. They have extraordinary capabilities, no question, but they're also governed by some of the most incompetent people, and they can never seem to agree on a mission, and money's not allocated in the right way. I did a story on the Secret Service, And what was amazing to me is the sheer number of responsibilities they have that has nothing to do with protecting the president. When you look at the Secret Service, what does an ordinary person think of? They think of, oh, those are the guys with sunglasses and the earpiece that stands in front of the president. That's actually a small part of what they do. They've been tasked with counterterror responsibilities. They've been tasked with even going after financial crimes. They used to be under the Treasury Department, but after 9/11, President Bush and the Congress created the Department of Homeland Security, which is the parent agency that the Secret Service was moved to from the Treasury Department, but they retained all of their Treasury functions of going after counterfeiters, going after financial crimes, things like cryptocurrency crimes. And in addition to that, inherited a bunch of new responsibilities from Homeland Security to go after supposed counter-terror threats. So all of that is to say they have a very muddled mission. Their budget has more than doubled over the last 10 years. And so where's all that money going to? I mean, some of it is probably going to the protective responsibilities they have, but a lot of it is going to these other things. So I think that in the context of the debate now about how do we fix this, part of that is going to have to be about why don't we narrow their mission so they're not having to chase after all of these extraneous things that I think leads to the kind of breakdowns that we saw the day of Trump's rally.
Well, it's true, and I've often argued it on here, that not everything is a conspiracy, that cock-up is more common than conspiracy, and that Keystone cops in the guise of DEI hires in the Secret Service could plausibly be said to have been responsible here. But there comes a point at which if something looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it could well be a duck. Would you agree with me at least that a very significant number of people in the United States, and I'm here to tell you in other parts of the world, believe this was November 63 revisited?
No question. As soon as it happened, I went on Twitter. I spent a lot of time on Twitter, and one of the top trends within minutes was staged. And I clicked on it because I was curious, what is that? And it was in reference to the idea, again, not one that I share, but like you're saying, held by, I think there was hundreds of thousands of people were tweeting this. Those people saying that they thought the shooting was staged because it was so hard for them to believe that the shooter would have been able to get that close to the most powerful person on earth without having been caught by, in Secret Service, what's called the advance teams, people that come in advance of a presidential or a VIP visit, and they're supposed to clear the area. When the event has begun, most of the work is already supposed to have been done. They have magnometers where you're supposed to pick up people's metal, like a metal detector to pick up guns and things like that. They're supposed to have cleared that entire area out well before the speech actually began. So it wasn't supposed to be possible that he could get on the top of that building in the first place. And I think that people look at that and decide, okay, well, he must have been allowed to. What I submit, I think, is perhaps even scarier, which is that they are so dumb that they can't even prevent something like that. And I would encourage people to just Google Secret Service scandal, and you will find dozens of them over the last decade alone. This is an agency that has been mired in repeated scandals and failures.
Have you been looking at all at this, the 20-year-old crooks, the gunman who came within a whisker of changing the world? Are you able to tell us any more about him and what his motivation might have been, what his skill level with weapons might have been? I don't know if you've looked into it, but if you have, I'd be interested to hear your take.
Yeah, so just before I joined you here, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, was testifying to Congress about exactly this question. He revealed something that has not been known previously, which is that the day that the shooter registered to attend the rally, they, through their cyber investigation of his laptop, were able to recover in his Google history that he had Googled, I'm trying to remember what the keywords were, it was something like, how far was Lee Harvey Oswald from Kennedy? And so it's clear from what has emerged so far about his own background and his own motives, I think, at least from the information so far, maybe this will change, that he was motivated by fame and wanting to become somebody and wanting to, enter the history books as somebody who could be likened to, as the Google search suggests, JFK's what that says to me is that the attempts to turn this into some kind of partisan narrative that it was a Democrat trying to kill a Republican, I just haven't seen the evidence for that. The extent of the evidence that we have to suggest that is that he made one political contribution, I believe of about $25 to a pro-Democrat PAC, as I recall, but he was a registered Republican. And I'm not saying he was Republican motivated by whatever. I'm also not saying he's a Democrat. I'm just saying it's a very muddled picture that I don't think offers us a satisfying political answer. And I think that's true of a lot of the country. People are not particularly, some people follow politics very closely, like myself, and I assume like you. But for a lot of people, it's just some kind of background noise, and they don't necessarily, they might have a mix of all kinds of different views, and that may have been the case with this individual. So, yeah, I think for whatever reason, he wanted to leave his mark on history, maybe some kind of sense of inadequacy. There's evidence that he was bullied when he was in school. To speak to your question of his experience with guns, he was really into guns. He was, I guess, a part of I can't remember if it was a Discord channel or some private chat where they talked about guns. He tried to join the gun club in college. So just really into guns, and probably had some degree of proficiency with them because of that. But that's pretty much the extent to what we know about him so far.
Ken Klippenstein, thank you very much, as always. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.